All eyes turned to the dog, a gentle, unassuming Labrador, when the defense attorney sneered, calling it a pathetic ploy to sway the jury. Seconds later, the judge's reaction left everyone speechless, halting the entire proceeding and revealing a truth deeper than the trial itself. The tension in the courtroom crackled like static. On one side, the prosecution carefully laid out facts and evidence, determined to see justice served. On the other, the defense team bristled, painting each piece of testimony as unreliable. The audience, family members, curious onlookers, strained to catch every word, anticipating how this controversial case might unfold. Then, during a brief recess, the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, revealing something unusual: a well-trained therapy dog stepping in, guided by a calm handler. The dog wore a small vest emblazoned with an official patch, there to provide comfort and emotional support to a crucial witness in the case. Soft murmurs rippled through the crowd. Was this even allowed? Would it sway the jury's sympathy? The defendant's attorney wasted no time hurling snide remarks, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're really resorting to animals in the witness box now. Are we so desperate we need a dog to tug at the jury's heartstrings?" A few people snickered. Even one or two in the gallery rolled their eyes. But the judge watched from the bench in contemplative silence. She'd seen therapy dogs in her courtroom before, animals brought in to soothe victims of trauma, especially children. Still, it wasn't common, and the spectacle of it seemed to fuel the defense's scorn. The dog, a gentle-eyed Labrador, merely sat beside the witness stand, tail neatly curled around its paws, radiating a quiet kind of presence that belied the mocking stares. The witness, a trembling teenager, sat down carefully, one hand resting on the dog's vest. Everyone expected the usual fear and stammering from such a vulnerable testimony. Instead, the witness found solace in the Labrador's calm gaze, shoulders relaxing as she began her account of what had happened. At first, the defense attorney's continued jabs about cheap theatrics drew a few snickers. Yet within minutes, something shifted in the courtroom. The hush grew deeper, the attorney's sneers lost their momentum, and the witness's words became more certain, each phrase anchored by the dog's calming effect. On the judge's face, a mix of compassion and resolve began to form, hinting she was seeing beyond the standard legal spectacle. No one could have guessed, however, just how powerfully this dog's presence would disrupt the attorney's ridicule, and how, in one pivotal moment, the entire proceeding would halt, leaving even the stern-eyed judge in tears. The teenager on the stand took a shaky breath, one hand still firmly on the Labrador's vest. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, and she hesitated, words caught in her throat. Then the dog gave a gentle nudge against her leg, a simple, quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. A flicker of new strength lit her eyes. She started testifying, slowly at first, describing the events that had brought her to this day. Every detail seemed painfully raw. Her voice wavered, but somehow, the dog's presence steadied her. Her shoulders, initially hunched in fear, relaxed bit by bit, and the clarity of her account stunned even those who had doubted her. The dog didn't move from its spot, just offered silent reassurance. Across the aisle, the defense attorney leaned back in his chair, eyes rolling. When the teen's voice caught on a traumatic memory, the dog raised its head, nose brushing her arm. Instead of crumbling, she exhaled and found her voice again. The attorney scowled, glancing at the jury to gauge if they were swayed by this display of animal empathy. Finally, he couldn't contain his impatience. "Your Honor," he said, standing abruptly, "this is highly irregular. A dog in a courtroom for emotional effect. We all sympathize with the witness, but we must remain objective. This is blatant jury manipulation." The judge's gaze was unflinching. "As you well know," she said coolly, "therapy and support animals have been allowed in certain court cases involving trauma victims. It's permissible so long as it doesn't disrupt proceedings. Thus far, I see no disruption." The attorney gave a hollow chuckle. "No disruption. The entire jury's focus is on that dog, not the facts of this case." He turned toward the jury box. "You're all looking at an animal, not at the evidence." A few jurors frowned at his aggressive tone. The teen on the stand flinched, and the Labrador responded instantly, shifting slightly closer to her chair. The attorney pointed. "You see, that's exactly what I mean, Your Honor. This dog is performing, not just sitting idly by." Before the judge could respond, the prosecuting attorney rose, a note of exasperation in his voice. "The only performance I see is from counsel. The dog hasn't made a sound. He's simply sitting with the witness." The judge banged her gavel once, letting the echo settle. "Attorneys, approach the bench," she said sternly, "and let us keep our voices down." She eyed the jury, nodding for them to remain calm. The two lawyers huddled at the bench, speaking in hushed tones. The judge's expression was terse. In that lull, the teen witness looked down at the dog, tears glistening. She seemed torn between relief and anxiety, unsure if the therapy dog would be forced out. The dog met her gaze with quiet devotion. She whispered something no one else could hear, stroking his soft ears. Then, unexpectedly, the judge returned to her seat, took a slow breath and locked eyes with the defense attorney. "I've considered your objection," she began, voice tight, "and I see no grounds for removing a legally permitted support animal. The witness has clearly testified with more composure as a result of the dog's presence, which is precisely the point of a therapy dog in court." A faint murmur of agreement rippled through the gallery. The defense attorney's jaw set, but he sat down, forced to concede for now. The judge turned back to the witness, voice gentler than before. "Please continue," she said quietly, nodding at the dog. "You're doing fine." The teen gathered her courage again. With each question from the prosecution, she gave clearer, steadier answers. The dog never barked or moved, just leaned in whenever her voice trembled. Finally, she finished, exhaling as though a great weight had lifted off her chest. As the attorney motioned to end direct examination, the dog gave another gentle nudge. The teen glanced down with gratitude, tears in her eyes. The judge offered the witness a short recess to gather herself. She nodded, stood, and left the stand. The dog padded out at her side, unaffected by the tension in the room. But the case wasn't done yet. The defense stood, calling their next move with a hint of smugness. "Your Honor," he said, "we have a counter-witness, and I'd like to request that the dog remain out of the courtroom during that testimony, so as not to sway emotional sentiment." The judge narrowed her eyes. "We'll discuss that after the break," she said, recessing for 15 minutes. The tension lingered, as if waiting to erupt into yet another clash over the dog's right to be present. No one realized how close they were to a moment that would upend the entire trial and leave the judge unable to hide the tears that would follow. The short recess felt more like a thunderstorm brewing than a simple break. Whispers filled the aisles as spectators predicted another heated debate over the dog's presence. The defense attorney paced near his table, occasionally glancing at his phone. The teenager and her therapy dog, meanwhile, took refuge in a small side room, accompanied by her counselor and the prosecutor. She sipped water, eyes weary from the ordeal of testifying. When the 15 minutes ended, the bailiff summoned everyone back. The courtroom settled into tense silence as the judge re-entered and called the session to order. The dog had not returned yet, likely waiting to see if the judge would allow it to stay during the next testimony. The defense attorney seemed determined to argue that enough was enough. "All right," the judge began, tone crisp. "Counsel, you wished to discuss the dog's status before calling your next witness." The defense attorney rose, nodding eagerly. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe we've already had enough emotional display from that animal. Given that our next witness is an expert on forensics, there's no need for a comfort dog in the courtroom. I request that the dog remain outside." A quiet hush fell. The prosecutor stood. "We believe removing the dog is unnecessary. The next witness might say things that are distressing to the victim, who remains in the audience. The therapy dog should be allowed to stay, if not by her side, then at least within the courtroom in case she needs to step out." The judge tapped her pen against the bench, thinking. She cast a glance toward the teenage girl, who sat in the second row, shoulders slumped. Her counselor offered a supportive arm. The dog was nowhere in sight, probably still in the hallway. In that moment of deliberation, something stirred at the courtroom doors. The handler stepped in, the Labrador walking calmly beside him. Heads turned, half expecting an uproar from the defense. Sure enough, the defense attorney inhaled sharply, about to object again. But before he could voice it, the dog paused, nose lifted as though it scented tension. The teen's eyes lit with relief, just seeing the dog, if only for a moment. "All right," the judge said firmly. "I don't see grounds to bar the dog from the courtroom. However, it should remain at the back unless the witness or the girl specifically requests its assistance. The dog must not disrupt the proceeding." The defense attorney clenched his jaw, but had no immediate rebuttal. He glanced at his co-counsel, who shrugged. They'd have to continue under these conditions grudgingly. "Very well," the judge continued. "Let's move on. Call your witness, please." The attorney turned to beckon in a forensic expert. A man in a crisp suit walked up, took the stand and began outlining technical data, trace evidence, lab results, and complicated analyses. It was all crucial to the case, but the tension remained thick, especially for the teen who watched from the second row, dog now sitting quietly behind her. For a time, nothing extraordinary happened. The expert droned on about chemical processes, the defense hammered on each detail, and the prosecutor occasionally objected to certain phrases. The judge maintained order with measured gavel taps. But then, during cross-examination, the forensic expert unexpectedly mentioned a piece of evidence that neither side had fully addressed, a detail about the victim's belongings found at the scene. It contradicted a timeline the defense had been pushing. A ripple of realization passed through the gallery. Several jurors exchanged looks as if a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. The defense attorney stiffened. "Objection, Your Honor," he said, a slight tremor in his voice. "This is outside the scope of what was previously disclosed." The judge leaned forward, a hint of suspicion crossing her features. "Is there a reason this detail was never mentioned before, Counselor?" Silence stretched. The attorney scrambled for words, flipping through his paperwork. The forensic expert adjusted his glasses, seemingly perplexed by the reaction his statement had provoked. And then, in the hush, the Labrador let out a low, almost inaudible whine. A strange hush settled over the room, like the dog sensed unease in the witness or the attorney. The teen turned around, worry in her eyes. The dog's posture remained calm, but that small sound carried an odd weight. The judge's gaze snapped to the attorney. Something flickered there, some recognition that the dog's subtle reaction might mean more than anyone realized. The attorney, noticing the judge's stare, began to sweat. And just like that, the carefully managed trial teetered on the edge of another revelation, one that would test not only the dog's role, but the integrity of the entire proceeding. That soft whine from the Labrador settled over the courtroom like a distant siren, quiet but impossible to ignore. The judge paused, gaze lingering on the dog. It wasn't barking or growling, just a subdued, almost pained sound. An unease rippled through the gallery, and the teenage girl's brow furrowed as she met the dog's eyes, gently stroking its head to calm it. "Is something amiss?" the judge asked, her voice carefully measured. She directed the question not at the defense attorney, but at the forensic expert on the stand. "Please continue your testimony. We need to clarify this piece of evidence." The expert cleared his throat, flipping through his notes. "Yes, Your Honor." "As I was saying, the victim's personal item, an ID card, was found at the scene, and the timeline suggests it appeared there after the initial search, meaning it wasn't discovered during the first investigation, but rather introduced later." A hush fell. That single detail could imply tampering, planting, or even a mistake that reshaped the entire timeline. If the ID card didn't belong there originally, it might discredit the defense's argument or point to a cover-up. The defense attorney shot to his feet. "Objection!" he barked, though his voice betrayed a slight tremor. "This is speculation. The expert can't prove the item was introduced later." The prosecution leaned forward. "He has lab analyses showing the card's surface was free of the initial dust pattern found on every other object. It indicates it was placed there post-investigation. That's not speculation." The judge lifted a hand. "I'll allow the testimony, but I want clarity on what that implies for the timeline and for the defense's explanation of events." An uneasy ripple spread through the courtroom. The defense attorney stiffened, flipping through his files with increasing desperation. Meanwhile, the Labrador shifted again, releasing another low whine. It was as if the dog sensed mounting tension or concealed stress among those who'd tried to shape the narrative. The judge noticed, eyebrows knitting slightly. She turned to the teenage girl. "Is the dog all right?" She stroked the dog's ears, voice soft. "He does this when someone feels upset or cornered. In therapy sessions, I've seen him do it if a client is anxious but hiding it. It's like he picks up on that energy." The defense attorney scoffed. "Your Honor, can we please not interpret a dog's random sounds as evidence?" A beat of silence passed before the judge's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Sometimes animals sense more than we do." She inhaled, returning to business. "Prosecution, proceed with your next question." The forensic expert continued, slowly detailing how the ID card's condition clashed with the initial scene photos. As he spoke, the defense attorney grew visibly agitated, shuffling papers, muttering objections that the judge calmly overruled. With each passing minute, the attorney's discomfort became more pronounced. Beads of sweat gathered at his temples, and his glances at the jury held a hint of panic. At last, the expert finished. The prosecution nodded. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge turned to the defense attorney. "Counsel, do you wish to cross-examine?" For a moment, he just stood there, breathing heavily. Then he approached the stand, mustering a brittle confidence. But as he asked his first question, his voice cracked. A rustle of confusion spread through the gallery. The attorney clenched his jaw, tried again, and managed a short sentence challenging the lab's chain of custody. The forensic expert responded calmly, explaining the thorough protocols in place. The dog released another soft whine, ears pinned back. The teen reached to comfort him, but the dog almost nudged forward, its gaze fixed on the defense attorney. A flicker of alarm crossed the attorney's face, and he fumbled the next question, stepping back abruptly. Then something snapped in him. "Your Honor, I think we need a recess," he blurted, voice shaking. "I'm feeling unwell." Before the judge could answer, he stumbled sideways, jurors gasped, and an officer quickly helped steady him. The judge banged the gavel for order. The attorney pushed away the supportive hand, eyes darting in every direction, finally landing on the dog's unwavering stare. In that charged moment, the judge's own composure wavered. She looked from the terrified attorney to the quiet dog and seemed to realize something. The attorney wasn't just unwell physically, he was unraveling under the weight of a truth he couldn't hide any longer. She rose, removing her glasses. Her voice trembled around the edges. "Court is adjourned until further notice. Everyone, clear the room. Bailiff, escort counsel to medical assistance." A stunned hush followed. The teenage girl blinked in confusion as the dog pressed closer to her side. The judge looked at the dog, tears shining in her eyes for reasons no one could fully comprehend. Then she left the bench, stepping down quickly, hand pressed to her mouth, as though stifling a sob. No one had expected the day to end like this. Trial halted, the judge overcome, and the dog's soft whine echoing in the hush that remained. The courtroom emptied in hushed confusion, leaving only a handful of baffled observers and the teenager with her therapy dog. The bailiff gently guided them toward the exit, murmuring that they'd be contacted with further instructions. Meanwhile, the judge had left in such haste that she nearly forgot her robe on the bench. No one understood what had caused her sudden emotional outburst. In the hallway, the defense attorney slumped against a wall, hands shaking. A medic checked his vital signs while an officer hovered nearby. The attorney's face was etched with a strange mix of fear and exhaustion. The teen clutched the dog's leash, watching warily from a distance. Something about the man's expression suggested more than mere physical distress. He looked haunted. Sergeant Braxton, a friend of the judge, appeared from a side corridor. He nodded at the teen, acknowledging her presence, then went to speak quietly with the bailiff. The dog pressed close to the girl's leg, its posture still protective, as if sensing heightened tension in the hallway. When Braxton returned, he gave the teen a gentle nod. "The judge wants to see you," he said. "Privately, if you're comfortable." She blinked in surprise. "Me? Why?" "She didn't say," Braxton replied softly, "but it's your choice." Uncertain, the teen glanced at the dog, who simply gazed back, steadfast. Together, they followed Braxton down a short corridor to the judge's chambers. a modest room with shelves of law books and a single narrow window. The judge stood at that window, arms folded, staring at nothing in particular. The faint reddening around her eyes betrayed recent tears. She turned when they entered, mustering a fragile smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice husky. She gestured to the therapy dog. "And thank you for allowing your companion to accompany you." Her gaze flicked to the teen. "May I ask you to close the door, Sergeant?" Braxton complied, then took a respectful step back, letting the teen and the dog occupy the quiet center of the room. After a moment's hesitation, the teen spoke. "Your Honor, are you okay?" The judge inhaled, eyes drifting to the dog. "I'm sorry for the scene I caused. Seeing your dog in action, how it comforted you, how it reacted to that attorney, I was reminded of something I'd locked away. A memory from years ago, a case that ended tragically because a vital piece of evidence was never revealed, because an attorney withheld it until it was too late." The teen tilted her head, listening carefully. She'd never expected the judge to divulge personal reflections like this, but the older woman's eyes shone with deep regret. The dog stood quietly, as if understanding that this was a moment of truth. "It involved a child," the judge continued, voice trembling. "She needed help. A therapy dog might have empowered her to speak up, but she had none, and the attorney manipulated the facts. Justice wasn't served. The memory has haunted me." She inhaled shakily. "When your dog whined in the courtroom, I felt that old fear creeping back, the sense that someone was hiding something crucial again." A hush fell. The teen's mind replayed the moment the dog let out that soft whine, how the attorney had nearly lost composure. "So you think that attorney is withholding evidence?" she asked tentatively. The judge's eyes flickered. "I don't know, but I suspect it. That dog sensed something off. And my heart couldn't bear the possibility that history might repeat itself. So I stopped the proceedings." Steadying herself, she inhaled deeply. "I can't accuse him without proof, but I'll order a review of all discovery materials. I won't let another case slip away because of hidden truths." Relief mingled with awe in the teen's chest. She glanced down at the Labrador, who returned her gaze with quiet calm. He knew, she thought. He always does. A gentle knock on the door announced the bailiff. Braxton opened it a crack. "Your Honor, the defense attorney's stable, requesting a brief meeting." The judge straightened, blinking away lingering emotion. "I'll see him in the main courtroom," she decided, turning to the teen. "Thank you for hearing me out. And please, keep that dog close. He's done more than you realize." Exiting the chambers, the teen felt a weight lift. The dog had not only comforted her, but also reminded the judge of a painful case, a memory that might now spark a deeper inquiry into the attorney's actions. If there was evidence hidden or manipulated, perhaps it would surface under the judge's new scrutiny. And as they left the hallway behind, stepping into the main corridor's bustle, a thread of hope wove through the tension. The defense attorney's meltdown, the judge's tearful exit, none of it was random. The dog had quietly pulled back a curtain on secrets that threatened justice. With the judge now determined to revisit every corner of the case, the path forward might lead to truths that no one expected, and a resolution that would vindicate not only the teen's testimony, but the dog's uncanny instinct that sparked it all. The courtroom reconvened later that afternoon, tension thick enough to taste. News of the judge's abrupt recess and the defense attorney's apparent breakdown had circulated among the small crowd. Whispers filled the seats. What's going on with the case? Why did the judge leave in tears? No one had clear answers yet, only speculation. The teen, once again in attendance with her therapy dog, felt her nerves resurface. She settled into a seat at the back, the dog resting calmly at her feet. Sergeant Braxton stood near a side door, arms folded, watchful. The defense attorney arrived last, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He offered no explanation for his earlier episode, but his usual swagger was noticeably gone. The judge entered, looking composed but wearing the weight of what had transpired. She wasted no time, calling the session to order. "Before we proceed with witness testimony," she said, voice unwavering, "I must address the court." She glanced toward the defense attorney. "I've instructed counsel for both sides to resubmit all discovery materials for thorough review. Any new or withheld evidence must come to light now. The attorney stiffened. Your Honor, we have disclosed everything. This re-examination is unnecessary. Her tone remained calm but firm. Given the recent revelations from the forensic expert, I disagree. We'll ensure no stone is left unturned. A hush spread as the jury exchanged uncertain looks. The defendant himself shifted anxiously at the defense table. The prosecuting attorney gave a subtle nod, as though supporting the judge's directive. All right, the judge continued. We'll allow the dog to remain for emotional support if the witness chooses to testify again, or if any further sensitive material arises. Let's proceed with the scheduled testimonies, but be advised, I will halt the session if we encounter more irregularities. The forensic expert returned to the stand for clarification on certain points about the ID card discovered at the scene. This time, the defense attorney sounded more subdued. He asked basic questions, but the usual hostility had faded. It was as if the tension between them had shifted. At one point, the dog let out a small exhale, like a soft sigh, and the expert paused, glancing curiously at the Labrador before continuing. The session ran smoothly for a while, addressing minor details and procedural clarifications. Yet beneath it all, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation, as if the entire courtroom sensed a storm brewing behind the scenes. The teen watched intently, heart thumping, waiting for a moment that might shift everything. Then, as the day neared its end, the defense attorney rose unexpectedly. He cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact with the jury. Your Honor, he said, voice wavering, I realize the importance of full transparency in this matter. In light of your directive, I have reviewed all files once more. He paused, flicking his gaze toward the dog, still calmly stationed near the teen. There is a piece of evidence I had overlooked. The judge's expression hardened. Overlooked, Counselor. He swallowed. Yes. A digital record from the scene's perimeter camera logs, footage that might indicate who placed the ID card there. It was mislabeled in our system, and I failed to bring it forward. His words spilled out in a quiet confession, overshadowed by the shock on the prosecutor's face and the hush among jurors. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The teen's eyes widened. The judge inhaled slowly, controlling her reaction. We'll need that record immediately, and I trust you understand the seriousness of this withholding. He nodded, shoulders slumped as though carrying a great weight. Yes, Your Honor. The dog's ears perked. A soft rustle spread as people shifted, absorbing the confession. The judge signaled the bailiff to retrieve the new data, and the session adjourned for the day, leaving everyone reeling. The attorney's admission pointed to exactly what the dog's subtle reaction had suggested: hidden truth. After the gavel's final tap, the teen rose, dog by her side, feeling a curious mix of relief and vindication. The memory of that small whine echoed in her mind, how the dog had keyed in on something that no one else had recognized. The judge's tears, the attorney's meltdown, the withheld footage, it all tangled into a single thread that led here. Outside in the hallway, Sergeant Braxton offered a half-smile. Looks like your friend here helped unearth the truth again, he murmured, gesturing at the dog's calm posture. I don't know what it is about therapy animals and fear, but they always manage to peel back the layers. The teen patted the dog's head, eyes soft. He sees what we're afraid to acknowledge, she whispered, voice thick with gratitude. Even fear hidden behind a fancy suit. In that moment, she realized once more why this gentle Labrador mattered so much. And why, for all the mocking the dog endured, there were tears on a judge's face. Tears that recognized the priceless role of a silent witness to hidden truths. The following morning, a hush of expectation hung over the courtroom. News of the defense attorney's belated disclosure had traveled fast, another piece of crucial evidence supposedly overlooked. Faces in the gallery were tense, waiting for the new footage to be reviewed. The teenage girl arrived early, dog at her side, heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and cautious hope. If the footage confirmed what the forensic expert hinted at, it could unravel the defense's entire case. The judge entered, calm but resolute. She gave a curt nod to the bailiff, and the session began. The defense attorney, looking pale and weary, stood to speak. Your Honor, As promised, I've provided the mislabeled footage. It appears to show an individual planting the ID card at the crime scene after investigators completed their initial sweep. A wave of murmurs rippled. The prosecuting attorney's eyes narrowed. "We demand to view this footage immediately in court. The jury deserves to see it." The judge agreed, instructing the bailiff to play the short clip on a screen visible to all. The lights dimmed, and the shaky video began, a timestamp from late evening after the official scene closure, and a shadowy figure slipping under the taped boundary. The figure bent down, fumbling with something near a patch of dirt and debris. Despite the poor lighting, it was clear they were leaving an object, likely the ID card. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Jurors craned forward. The judge's face hardened, recognizing the significance. The entire narrative of the defense's timeline might have been fabricated around false evidence. The dog, sitting quietly near the teen, offered no reaction this time, no whine or bark. But its very stillness spoke volumes, as though verifying that the truth had finally emerged. The defense attorney cleared his throat. Gaze lowered. "I regret not providing this earlier, Your Honor," he said quietly. "It was an error on my part." His tone suggested it was more than an error. It felt almost like a confession of guilt or complicity. The judge set aside her glasses. "You realize the gravity of this," she said, voice steady. "This footage undermines your client's entire defense. I'll need to confer with counsel immediately." She banged the gavel lightly. "Court is in recess." As the lights returned, the tension in the room didn't dissipate. Instead, it sharpened, focusing on the man who had withheld the evidence. Officers guided him toward the hallway, questions flying from reporters who had begun gathering. The teenage girl stood with her dog, heart racing, relieved but unsettled by just how much had been concealed. The judge exited briskly, too, her expression unreadable. But as she passed the teen, she slowed. Their eyes met, and for a second, something like understanding flickered between them. No words were exchanged. Then the judge turned, robe swishing, and vanished through a side door. Left in the hushed courtroom, the teen knelt beside her dog. "You did it," she whispered, half disbelieving. "If you hadn't sensed something was off, who knows if that footage would ever see the light of day?" The Labrador simply gazed back, tail giving a gentle wag. Outside, on the courthouse steps, reporters clustered, eager to corner anyone leaving. Some recognized the dog from the earlier fiasco, cameras snapping. The girl held the leash firmly, politely declining interviews. She was no media star, just a witness who'd found an ally in a dog's quiet intuition. An hour later, Sergeant Braxton located her in a quiet alcove of the building. "The judge wants to speak with you again," he said, voice kind. "Up in her chambers." She blinked, nodding. The dog's ears perked, as if understanding they were needed once more. In the judge's office, the atmosphere was charged. The judge sat behind her desk, shoulders taut, but she offered a small, genuine smile when they entered. I owe you both gratitude," she said, looking from the teen to the dog. "You reminded me that sometimes it only takes one sign, one subtle reaction, to unravel a whole lie." The teen swallowed, feeling the dog shift closer. "We just did what was right," she managed. The judge rose from her chair, crossing to place a gentle hand on the Labrador's head. "And in doing so, you might have saved an innocent person from a grave injustice or uncovered a deeper deception. I won't forget that." She hesitated, as though waging an internal battle, then sighed. "This dog, it's more than therapy. It's truth. Please keep standing for that." Touched by the emotion in her voice, the girl nodded, eyes flicking to the dog's calm brown gaze. "He always will." And with that, the judge escorted them out, the building's tension giving way to a sense of closure. The trial's outcome would depend on the final analysis of that newly revealed footage, but the teen felt certain justice was finally on the right track. Stepping into the cool afternoon air, the dog at her heels, she breathed deeply. Though they had endured scorn in the courtroom, they had also opened a door to the truth. And in the judge's tears lay not just sorrow, but a powerful acknowledgement. Sometimes a dog's quiet whine can break the silence that holds a courtroom captive. In the days that followed, News of the hidden evidence discovery rippled through the local legal community. Attorneys whispered about the dog who'd exposed a lie, though they couldn't quite rationalize how a quiet whine became the catalyst for uncovering tampered evidence. Some mocked the idea of attributing justice to a Labrador. Others marveled at how animals often sense tension people ignore. The teenage girl, meanwhile, received messages from other witnesses in similar court cases. Some sought advice on bringing therapy dogs to ease their fears. Others just wanted to share gratitude for making it known that support animals had a role to play, even in the stern world of law. She felt a quiet sense of purpose replying to them, reminding them they weren't alone. Her own case continued with a new sense of direction. The defendant's entire defense strategy had crumbled, forcing a plea deal that spared the teen from a drawn-out trial. The day the judge announced the final terms, the court was much calmer. The defense attorney, chastened and subdued, offered no more snide remarks about cheap theatrics. The teen still had her dog by her side, though now he sat unobtrusively in a corner rather than near the stand. When the session ended, the defendant accepted responsibility, effectively closing the matter that had caused the teen so many sleepless nights. Though relief surged in her chest, she also felt the weight of finality. There would be no big celebratory victory, just a simple, quiet conclusion, made possible by honesty and a single therapy dog's gentle warning. Afterwards, as she emerged into the courthouse lobby, she spotted Sergeant Braxton leaning against a marble column, arms folded casually. A slight grin curved his lips when he saw her. The dog wagged its tail, pulling on the leash just enough to reach him for a friendly nudge. "How do you feel?" Braxton asked gently. She let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. "Lighter," she admitted, placing a hand on the dog's head. "It's strange, but I almost feel proud. Not of the pain I went through, but of how we handled it." Braxton nodded. "You should be, and you should be proud of him too." He indicated the dog, who gazed up with calm devotion. A moment later, the judge appeared at the far end of the lobby. She approached, face no longer clouded with tears but reflecting a kind of solemn respect. "Case dismissed," she said softly, meeting the teen's eyes. "I'm sorry you had to endure that. I hope today brings you closure." The teen gave a small nod. "Thank you for allowing the dog to stay with me." A faint smile tugged at the judge's lips. "He did more than stay. He reminded us that truth has many forms. Sometimes it's a whine or a shift in posture. Sometimes it's a piece of footage we almost lost. However it emerges, I'm grateful for it." She reached down to give the Labrador a gentle pat on the shoulder. The dog responded with a slow wag, as if acknowledging an unspoken bond between them. Then the judge cleared her throat, standing straighter. "I must go finalize paperwork." "Take care of yourself." She offered a nod to Braxton and the teen, then walked away, her robes swishing across the polished floor. Left in the quiet hush of the lobby, the teen let her hand rest on the dog's vest. "It's really over," she murmured, voice trembling with a mix of release and lingering awe. "You helped make that happen." The dog's gaze remained steady, as though saying, "I was always here. So were you." As they stepped out into the spring air, the courthouse behind them, Braxton turned to the teen. "I think people will talk about this trial for a while," he said, a gentle humor in his tone. "The day a Labrador's soft whine changed everything." She nodded, picking up on the irony. "They mocked him at first, remember?" She recalled the defense attorney's sneers, the sideways glances from onlookers. But in the end, he was right. "Funny how that works," Braxton agreed. "The quietest signals can reveal the biggest lies." The teen gazed at the dog, an overwhelming gratitude catching in her chest. Then, with the dog's leash in her hand and a new sense of peace in her step, she walked away from the courthouse. Today, there would be no more mocking, only respect for an animal who saw past the pretense and led them all to the truth. A week after the trial concluded, the teenage girl and her therapy dog received an invitation to speak at a small legal symposium, an event where lawyers, law students, and even a few judges gathered to discuss issues that shape courtroom proceedings. She hesitated initially. Standing in front of seasoned legal professionals felt more daunting than testifying in court. But a gentle reminder from Sergeant Braxton, "You changed more than you think," convinced her to accept. On the day of the symposium, she arrived at a modest auditorium tucked into a corner of the local university's campus. Dark wooden chairs lined the floor, and a low stage stood at the front. The dog trotted beside her, calm as ever. Participants, many in suits and carrying notebooks, whispered in recognition, "Is that the dog who exposed hidden evidence? Didn't that therapy dog cause a meltdown in court?" The program began with routine topics, new legal precedents, updated procedures. Finally, the moderator introduced her. "Today, we have a unique perspective from someone who experienced firsthand the power of a therapy dog in court. Please welcome, along with her devoted canine companion, Miss Daniels." Stepping up to the microphone, she took a breath, the dog sitting faithfully at her side. She wasn't sure how to start, so she spoke from the heart. "I never planned to be in the middle of a controversial case," she began quietly, scanning the attentive faces, "and I never thought a dog could shift the direction of justice, but that's exactly what happened." She recounted, simply but vividly, the day the dog's presence had changed her own testimony, allowing her to speak without breaking down. Then she described the trial's turning point, the dog's soft whine that hinted at hidden truths and shook the defense attorney's confidence. "People mocked him at first," she said, voice trembling with a mix of emotion and pride. "But the same ones who sneered ended up watching in awe when the real evidence came to light." She spoke about the judge's reaction, tears that signaled an old wound, a memory of justice lost. She spoke of the quiet nods from the jury, the recognition in their eyes that sometimes empathy is as crucial to truth as logic. The crowd listened in rapt silence. When she finished, applause rippled through the auditorium, measured at first, then growing. People stood clapping with genuine respect. She didn't expect such a powerful response. This was a crowd of legal minds after all, but maybe that was precisely why it resonated. They recognized how something so unorthodox, a therapy dog's quiet presence, could cut through legal maneuvering and reach the heart of a case. Afterwards, several lawyers approached her. A retired judge shook her hand, voice thick with emotion, thanking her for reminding us what justice can look like. A law student, eyes shining, asked if he could take a photo with her and the dog, admitting he wanted to advocate for more therapy dogs in court. She felt a blend of relief and responsibility. She glanced down at the Labrador, who simply wagged his tail, panting softly. Even here, in a formal gathering of legal professionals, the dog exuded that same quiet warmth that had held her together in court. Leaving the symposium, she found Sergeant Braxton waiting outside, arms folded, an unreadable expression on his face. She smiled. "I think that went okay." He gave a small chuckle. "You had them in the palm of your hand. The dog probably helped." She knelt to hug the Labrador around the neck. "He always does," she murmured. Turning to Braxton, she added more seriously, "I hope this sparks something. Maybe more courts will allow therapy dogs without so much mockery." Braxton's smile turned reflective. "It might. Sometimes it takes one story to shift people's perspectives." The sun was setting, casting orange and pink streaks across the sky. Holding the dog's leash gently, she inhaled the cool air. "He started as just a comfort for me," she said softly, "but he ended up comforting a whole courtroom, and in the end, he reminded a judge of what she'd lost. That's pretty huge." Braxton placed a hand on her shoulder. "Huge indeed." They walked away from the university campus, footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. She felt the dog's steady gait beside her, as though reminding her we're still here carrying the truth forward. And that was enough. Wherever the legal world went from here, whether more therapy dogs appeared in court or whether cynics continued to scoff, no one could erase what had happened. The day a gentle Labrador, mocked by some, uncovered enough hidden pain to bring a courtroom to tears and ultimately reshape the pursuit of justice. A few weeks later, in a surprising yet symbolic gesture, the judge invited the teenage girl and her therapy dog back to the courthouse, this time for a small reception celebrating innovations in courtroom support. The local bar association planned to honor the handful of professionals who had advanced the use of therapy animals for vulnerable witnesses. To the girl's astonishment, they also wanted to recognize her and the Labrador. She arrived on a brisk morning, the dog at her side, feeling a pang of nostalgia. How different this building looked now compared to her first anxious appearance. She walked the same halls where she'd once trembled, but calm replaced fear. And even staffers who barely knew her offered kind smiles. A few recognized the dog, quietly tipping their heads in respect. At the reception, a modest gathering of judges, lawyers, and civic leaders sipped coffee and nibbled on pastries arranged in the foyer outside courtroom 2. The dog stood by the girl's chair, tail wagging gently as new faces approached to greet them. A sense of affirmation settled over her. No more mocking eyes, no snide remarks about manipulative tactics. Instead, a collective curiosity. How did this dog bring about so much truth and healing? Partway through, the judge stepped forward, clearing her throat for attention. She wore a navy suit rather than her robe, but her presence was just as commanding. A hush fell. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Today, the judge stood in front of the assembled group, offering the teenage girl and her therapy dog a warm, almost maternal smile. The hush that fell over the modest reception spoke of respect for both the office she held and the story everyone had come to celebrate. "I want to begin," she said, voice carrying gently across the space, "by acknowledging the bravery of the witness who trusted in an unconventional ally. The therapy dog who provided not only comfort, but also illuminated truths that might have remained hidden. In our pursuit of justice, we often focus on evidence, procedure, and argument. We sometimes forget the human, or in this case, the canine element that can bridge what we know and what we fear to say." Applause rippled through the small crowd, quiet but genuine. The teenage girl lowered her gaze, cheeks flushing as a wave of humility washed over her. The dog, sitting calmly beside her, tilted its head at the sound of clapping, tail giving a gentle thump. Pausing, the judge glanced at a small plaque resting on a nearby table. "This is a new commendation," she explained, "one we haven't given out before. A recognition of extraordinary contribution to the justice system by a non-human participant." A faint, wry smile touched her lips. "We're naming it the Steadfast Companion Award. And while we might have never imagined awarding such an honor to a dog, I believe it's well-deserved." She turned, picking up the wooden plaque. The engraved text read, "Steadfast Companion Award presented to dog's name Therapy. Dog for unwavering empathy and courage, reminding our court of the power of quiet truth." Eyes glistening, the judge beckoned the girl forward. The dog followed, wagging its tail, eyes fixed on the judge. "Thank you for showing us a different side of justice," the judge whispered, placing the plaque in the girl's trembling hands. "Your bond with this dog, your willingness to let him share your stand, allowed truth to surface in ways we rarely see." The girl nodded, words caught in her throat. She ran a hand gently over the plaque's smooth surface. Thank you," she managed softly, voice trembling with emotion. "He gave me the courage to speak, and he gave all of us the courage to look deeper." Another round of applause circled the room, with a few people dabbing at tears. One older attorney stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I'd like to add something," he said. "I was skeptical when I first heard about therapy dogs in court. I believed the process should remain strictly factual, but seeing what happened when this dog simply existed in the room, how it allowed a fearful witness to speak, how it prompted a meltdown that revealed hidden evidence, well, I've changed my perspective." He placed a gentle pat on the dog's vest. "Animals often sense what humans overlook. That day, the dog's quiet whine uncovered more than just fear. It uncovered dishonesty." With a solemn nod to the teenager, he added, "Thank you for letting us witness that." The teenage girl gave a shy smile, tears brimming. She knelt, hugging the dog around its neck. The Labrador leaned into her, tail wagging steadily. For a moment, the entire gathering seemed to share in the warmth of that embrace, reminded that justice wasn't just about winning or losing, but about unveiling truth, even if it required the gentle presence of a dog. After a few more words of gratitude and a flurry of handshakes, the reception began to wind down. People drifted off, returning to their daily routines. The judge lingered a little longer, pulling the girl aside near the edge of the room. "I know you're still healing," she said kindly, But remember, your dog wasn't the only brave soul in that courtroom. The girl blinked, tears sliding down her cheeks. I just did what I had to. And sometimes that's more heroic than any of us realize, the judge replied, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. She nodded to the dog. Both of you taught us all a lesson about compassion, and that mocking something we don't understand can blind us to the truth. Moments later, the teenage girl stepped outside with her therapy dog, Plaque, cradled in her arms, the crisp air filling her lungs. As the sun dipped behind the courthouse spire, she felt a quiet sense of closure. Yes, they had been mocked at first, jeered for bringing a dog into the solemn halls of justice. Yet in the end, that dog's unwavering presence had led to tears that reopened old wounds, uncovered hidden lies, and paved the way for honest resolution. Walking down the courthouse steps, the girl glanced at the dog's soft brown eyes and whispered, "We did it." The dog blinked as if affirming all that had been accomplished, and in that final, peaceful moment, they departed, no longer weighed down by the sneers that once filled the courtroom, but carrying forward an unbreakable bond that proved empathy and truth could stand side by side, stronger than any scorn. The soft glow of late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the courthouse foyer. The teenage girl and her therapy dog lingered near the entrance, chatting quietly with Sergeant Braxton. Voices of other departing attendees echoed as they stepped outside, reflecting on a court case that had begun in skepticism but ended in unexpected revelation. After the ceremony honoring the dog's contribution, a modest affair with heartfelt speeches, most people dispersed, carrying renewed respect for how empathy could coexist with the rigorous demands of law. The dog, calm and regal, lay at the girl's feet, as though he'd done this 100 times. She patted his side, recalling every moment of their journey, the sneers, the hush after his quiet whine, the judge's tears, and eventually, the truth laid bare. "Feels strange not to have another session or hearing to worry about," she remarked, looking up at Braxton. "For so long we were on edge, waiting for the next conflict." Braxton nodded. "Sometimes, that's how justice resolves. Abruptly, in a wave of truth no one foresaw. But you and your dog made that wave possible." He crouched to give the Labrador a fond scratch behind the ears. "You reminded everyone that the law shouldn't be blind to compassion, even if some find it unorthodox." A security guard passed by, tipping his cap at them. The girl offered a small smile in return, noticing how the dog's presence elicited warmth instead of derision now. Gone were the days when the dog's mere entry to the courtroom fueled sneers. Instead, he left behind an example of quiet dignity that pried open hidden truths. Each footstep they took felt lighter, as if they'd unburdened not only themselves, but others in the process. She recalled how the judge had asked to see them in private, confessing her old wounds about a lost case, describing how one dog's gentle whine had stirred a memory she couldn't suppress. That was the moment the judge's tears came, not out of weakness, but a recognition that no system is truly perfect, and sometimes it takes an animal's intuition to push humans into confronting what they'd rather hide. A man in a suit approached, a subdued look on his face. It was one of the jurors who'd observed the entire ordeal. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, hand extended. "I've never seen a trial shift so drastically because of something so simple as a dog's reaction, but I'm glad I witnessed it. You gave us a reason to look deeper." The girl felt a wave of gratitude. She shook his hand gently. "It was never about us alone," she replied. "Sometimes one small sign, a dog's whine, carries more weight than hours of argument if it points to a hidden lie." He nodded, eyes drifting to the therapy dog. "I hope more courts adopt this practice for vulnerable witnesses. The difference was night and day in your testimony." She didn't know how else to respond, but with a smile and a quiet "thank you," the juror turned and walked away, leaving a sense of closure behind him. After a few more goodbyes and mild applause, the crowd thinned. Finally, the girl, her dog, and Braxton stepped out into the golden light of sunset. The hush of the day's end felt strangely peaceful. "So," Braxton said softly, "what now?" She considered the dog, who gazed back at her, tail swishing. "We keep doing what we do," she said, helping people understand that therapy dogs aren't just for show. They have a place, maybe even a vital one, in seeking truth. My dog showed everyone that you can't always trust appearances, but you can trust empathy to reveal what's hidden. Braxton smiled, nodding. Well put. They parted ways on the courthouse steps, Braxton returning to his duties, the girl and her dog heading toward the bus stop. As they walked, a sense of calm resolution settled over her. The echoes of scorn and mocking from that initial day in court had long been replaced by quiet respect. The judge's tears had sealed the transition, reminding everyone that a dog's presence could be more than comfort. It could shine a spotlight on dishonesty, exposing it for what it was. And as they meandered home under the warm glow of dusk, the teenage girl stroked the dog's ears, reflecting on how one whine in a moment of tension had rippled into a wave of confessions and revelations. She didn't need the court's gavel to ring out, or a grand speech to confirm it. The justice they'd found in tears and truth was enough. The dog had proven that empathy could unearth secrets the world tried to bury, and that was all anyone needed to remember. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of empathy and in the silent strength of an animal to change hearts, share this video. Subscribe to our channel for more uplifting real-life stories where unexpected heroes step forward. And please leave a comment below. What moment in your life taught you that sometimes it takes a quiet friend to reveal hidden truths? Because mockery can fade, tears can heal, but the bonds forged in truth and compassion last far beyond the courtroom doors.